The story of democracy, from ancient beginnings to modern triumphs.
Once upon a time, in a small, sunlit classroom in the heart of Athens, a curious young boy named Alexios sat listening to his teacher, Socrates. Socrates was not just any teacher, he was one of the greatest philosophers of all time. On this particular day, he was explaining the concept of democracy, a term that intrigued Alexios deeply.
The birth of democracy in ancient Greece.
Socrates began his lesson with the origins of democracy. Democracy, he explained, comes from the Greek words demos, meaning the people, and kratos, meaning power or rule. It literally means the rule of the people. Socrates painted a vivid picture of how democracy was born in Athens around 508 BCE under the leadership of Cleisthenes. Cleisthenes, often called the father of Athenian democracy, introduced reforms that allowed ordinary citizens to participate in government. He reorganized the population into 10 tribes, each with representatives in the assembly, a body that made important decisions for the city-state. This system was revolutionary because it gave power to the common people, not just the elite.
The Athenian assembly.
Alexios imagined himself standing in the Nix, the hill where the assembly met. He saw citizens debating laws, voting on policies, and holding leaders accountable. Every male citizen over the age of 18 could speak and vote, a stark contrast to the monarchies and oligarchies that ruled most of the ancient world. The assembly operated on the principle of direct democracy, where citizens voted directly on legislation rather than electing representatives to make decisions for them. This system required active participation and fostered a sense of civic duty among the Athenians.
The role of philosophers.
Socrates continued, democracy also gave rise to critical thinking and philosophical debate. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle examined its strengths and weaknesses. Plato, a student of Socrates, was skeptical of democracy, fearing that it could lead to mob rule and the election of unqualified leaders. In his work The Republic, he proposed a government led by philosopher kings, who would rule with wisdom and justice. Aristotle, Plato's student, took a more pragmatic view. He believed in a mixed government that balanced elements of democracy, oligarchy, and monarchy. Aristotle's ideas influenced future political thinkers and helped shape the development of democratic institutions.
Democracy in Rome.
As Alexios grew older, his fascination with democracy only deepened. He traveled to Rome, where he learned about the Roman Republic, which existed from 509 BCE to 27 BCE. The Roman Republic had a complex system of government that combined elements of democracy with oligarchy. In Rome, the citizens elected representatives to the Senate, a powerful body that made laws and advised the consuls, the chief executives of the Republic. Although the Roman Republic was not a pure democracy, it introduced the concept of a representative government, where elected officials acted on behalf of the people.
The fall of ancient democracies.
Despite their innovations, both Athenian democracy and the Roman Republic eventually fell. Socrates' dire predictions seemed to come true when Athens succumbed to internal strife and external pressures, leading to its conquest by Macedon in 338 BCE. The Roman Republic, plagued by corruption, social inequality, and power struggles, gave way to the Roman Empire in 27 BCE. Alexios pondered the lessons of history. He realized that democracy was fragile and required constant vigilance to protect against tyranny and corruption.
The Renaissance and Enlightenment.
Centuries passed, and democracy lay dormant, overshadowed by monarchies and feudal systems. But Alexios' spirit of curiosity and inquiry lived on in the minds of scholars during the Renaissance and Enlightenment. In the 17th and 18th centuries, thinkers like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Montesquieu reignited the flame of democratic ideas. Locke's theories of natural rights and government by consent influenced the development of modern democratic principles. Rousseau's concept of the social contract emphasized the importance of the general will and direct participation in governance. Montesquieu's idea of the separation of powers, outlined in The Spirit of the Laws, proposed dividing government into branches to prevent any one group from gaining too much power. These ideas laid the groundwork for modern democratic systems.
The American Revolution.
Alexios' journey took him across the Atlantic to the American colonies in the late 18th century. There, he witnessed the birth of a new democracy. Inspired by Enlightenment ideals, the American colonists declared their independence from Britain in 1776. The Founding Fathers, including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison, designed a system of government that incorporated democratic principles. The United States Constitution, adopted in 1787, established a federal republic with a strong emphasis on individual rights and the rule of law. The Constitution created a system of checks and balances, with separate executive, legislative, and judicial branches. This structure aimed to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful and ensured accountability and transparency in government.
The French Revolution.
Shortly after the American Revolution, Alexios found himself in France, where the French Revolution was unfolding. Inspired by the American example and fueled by social and economic inequalities, the French people rose up against the monarchy in 1789. The French Revolution led to the establishment of the First French Republic and the adoption of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a foundational document that enshrined principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Although the French Revolution experienced periods of turmoil and the rise of authoritarianism, it significantly contributed to the spread of democratic ideals in Europe and beyond.
The 19th century and expanding suffrage.
Throughout the 19th century, Alexios witnessed the gradual expansion of democratic rights. Many countries, inspired by the American and French revolutions, began to adopt democratic reforms. However, the struggle for universal suffrage was far from over. In Britain, the Reform Acts of 1832, 1867, and 1884 gradually expanded the right to vote, though it was initially limited to property-owning men. The Chartist movement, a working-class campaign for political reform, played a crucial role in advocating for broader suffrage and political representation. The 19th century also saw the abolition of slavery and the beginning of the women's suffrage movement. Activists like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton fought tirelessly for women's right to vote, laying the groundwork for future victories.
The 20th century. Democracy in peril and triumph.
The 20th century was a tumultuous period for democracy. Alexios witnessed the rise and fall of totalitarian regimes, world wars, and the Cold War. However, it was also a century of significant democratic advancements. After World War I, the League of Nations was established in an attempt to promote peace and cooperation among nations. Although it ultimately failed, it set the stage for the creation of the United Nations after World War II, an organization dedicated to fostering international collaboration and protecting human rights. The post-war period saw a wave of decolonization, as many countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America gained independence and established democratic governments. The civil rights movement in the United States, led by figures like Martin Luther King Jr., fought for racial equality and voting rights, leading to landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
The fall of the Berlin Wall.
One of the most iconic moments of the 20th century was the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Alexios found himself in the midst of jubilant crowds as East and West Berliners tore down the wall that had divided them for nearly 3 decades. The fall of the Berlin Wall symbolized the end of the Cold War and the triumph of democracy over totalitarianism in Eastern Europe. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 led to the emergence of new democracies in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Countries that had been under authoritarian rule for decades began to embrace democratic reforms and establish free and fair elections.
The 21st century, challenges and opportunities.
As Alexios journeyed into the 21st century, he saw that democracy continued to face significant challenges. The rise of populism, political polarization, and threats to press freedom and human rights posed new risks to democratic institutions. However, Alexios also witnessed the resilience and adaptability of democracy. The Arab Spring uprisings in the early 2010s demonstrated the enduring desire for democratic governance in the Middle East and North Africa. Although the outcomes varied, the movements highlighted the universal aspiration for freedom and political representation. Technological advancements, such as the Internet and social media, provided new platforms for political engagement and activism. While these tools offered opportunities for greater transparency and participation, they also posed challenges related to misinformation and privacy.
The importance of civic education.
Throughout his journey, Alexios realized the crucial role of civic education in sustaining democracy. He saw how informed and engaged citizens were essential for a healthy democratic society. Schools and communities that prioritized teaching the principles of democracy, critical thinking, and civic responsibility helped nurture future generations of active and responsible citizens. Alexios was inspired by initiatives that promoted civic education and participation. Programs like mock elections, debate clubs, and community service projects empowered young people to understand their rights and responsibilities and to contribute positively to their communities.
The future of democracy.
As Alexios' journey came to an end, he reflected on the incredible story of democracy. From its ancient beginnings in Athens to its modern-day challenges and triumphs, democracy had evolved and adapted, driven by the unwavering belief in the power of the people. Alexios understood that the future of democracy depended on the continued commitment of individuals and societies to uphold democratic values, protect human rights, and promote justice and equality. He felt a renewed sense of purpose and responsibility to be an active and informed citizen.
Conclusion.
Alexios' journey through the history and evolution of democracy taught him that the story of democracy is one of perseverance, resilience, and hope. It is a story that belongs to all of us, and it is our collective responsibility to ensure that democracy thrives for future generations.